world did not end with a bang for everyone. For the survivors of the KPG extinction, the silence that followed the fire was an opportunity. 66 million years ago, the stage was cleared. The titans that had defined predator for eons, the Tyrannosaurs and the Abilosaurs, were gone, reduced to ash and memory. What remained was a scorched, soot-stained earth inhabited by the small, the burrowing, and the lucky. Among these survivors were small, ground-dwelling birds. At the time, they were unassuming, scurrying through the undergrowth of a recovering world, but they carried a genetic blueprint that refused to forget the past. As the dust settled and the forests of the Cenozoic began to bloom, a massive ecological void sat empty. Nature abhors a vacuum, and the role of apex monster was up for grabs. Mammals were still small, timid creatures, scurrying in the shadows and largely focused on not being noticed. But the birds were the direct descendants of the theropods. They had the skeletons of runners and the eyes of hunters. In the isolation of South America, which had become a splendid isolation as a vast island continent, a peculiar evolutionary miracle began to take shape. Without the pressure of large mammalian carnivores, these birds didn't just survive, they reclaimed their heritage. Over several million years, their wings, no longer needed for flight in a land where they were the masters, shrank and became vestigial. Their legs grew long and powerful, designed for high-speed pursuit across opening plains. Most terrifyingly, their skulls began to swell. The delicate beaks of their ancestors hardened and curved into massive, bone-crushing hooks. By the time the Eocene epoch hit its stride, the transformation was complete. They were no longer just birds. They were the Phorusrhacidae. Standing taller than a human, with a cold reptilian stare and a beak the size of a horse's head, they were a haunting echo of the velociraptors of old. The power vacuum was filled. The dinosaurs had not truly left, they had simply changed clothes. As the first chapter of our story begins, we find ourselves in a lush, prehistoric South America, where the sound of approaching hoofbeats isn't a horse, it's the rhythmic, heavy thumping of a 300-pound bird coming to reclaim its crown. The age of the terror bird had begun. To understand the terror of the Phorusrhacid, you must stop thinking of a bird and start thinking of a biological guillotine. Evolution is often a slow, subtle process, but for these creatures, it was an arms race that they won by a landslide. By the middle of the Miocene, the terror bird had become a masterclass in biomechanical efficiency. Imagine standing in a high-grass savanna. You hear a sound, not the heavy, lumbering gait of a bear, but a rhythmic, high-frequency drumming. This is the sound of a predator that can sprint at 50 kilometers per hour. Their legs were long, thin, and packed with dense, explosive muscle, allowing them to chase down the fastest mammalian prey of the era. But the true horror wasn't in the chase, it was in the arrival. The skull of a Phorusrhacid was a marvel of engineering. Unlike modern birds, whose skulls are often light and flexible for flight, the Phorusrhacid skull was fused into a rigid, heavy-duty weapon. At the end of that skull sat a massive downward-curved beak, sharp as a scimitar and backed by the force of a neck made of pure corded muscle. CT scans of fossilized remains reveal a terrifying truth. These birds didn't just bite, they used their heads like a literal pickaxe. Recent biomechanical studies suggest a hunting style unlike anything we see today. They would use their incredible height to tower over their prey, then with a lightning-fast strike, drive that hooked beak straight down into the skull or spine of their target. It was a vertical attack, a strike and withdraw strategy. They would hit, back off to let the massive wound do its work, and then strike again. The force of this downward blow was enough to puncture bone and liquefy soft tissue instantly. But they weren't just brute force, they were agile. Their inner ear structure, preserved in stone, tells us they had an incredible sense of balance and a highly developed ability to track fast-moving objects with their eyes. They could pivot on a dime, their vestigial wings acting as tiny rudders to maintain stability during a high-speed turn. They were the ultimate combination of a sprinter's speed and a butcher's precision. In this world, if you were a small horse or a primitive ungulate, there was no outrunning them, and there was certainly no outfighting them. Every inch of their 500-pound frame was built for a single devastating purpose: to ensure that nothing they chased lived to see the sunset. For tens of millions of years, South America was a laboratory of evolutionary eccentricity. Separated from the rest of the world's land masses by vast, churning oceans, it became a splendid isolation where the rules of nature took a different turn. In this secluded arena, the terror birds were not just predators, they were the undisputed sovereigns. While the rest of the world saw the rise of massive mammalian carnivores like bone-crushing dogs and early cats, South America remained a kingdom of feathers and scales. As the climate shifted and the lush, dense jungles of the Eocene gave way to the sprawling, golden savannas of the Miocene, the Phorusrhacids scaled up to meet the challenge. This was the golden age of the avian empire. Imagine a landscape teeming with strange trunked mammals called macrauchenia and armored glyptodonts that looked like giant tortoises. In this world, the silhouette of a 10-foot-tall kelenken on the horizon was the ultimate signal of death. What made their reign so absolute was the lack of competition. The only other major predators were the sparacodonts, metatherian mammals related to marsupials, and the terrestrial cebocid crocodiles. But neither could match the sheer versatility of the terror bird. While the mammals were built for power and the crocodiles for ambush, the birds were built for the open chase. They patrolled the pampas like feathered sentinels, their keen eyes spotting movement from miles away. Fossil evidence from this era shows an incredible diversity of species, each carving out a specific niche. There were the giants like Brontornis, heavy-set and powerful, capable of taking down the largest herbivores with sheer blunt force. Then there were the medium-sized hunters, built like Olympic sprinters, designed to pick off the smaller, fleet-footed mammals of the plains. For over 20 million years, no mammalian predator could unseat them. They were the masters of the high-speed pursuit, the kings of the kill, and the architects of an ecosystem where being a bird meant being the most feared creature on the continent. This chapter of history represents a rare moment in time where the clock of evolution seemed to tick backward. It was a world that felt more like the Mesozoic than the modern era, a place where the cry of a giant bird was the last thing many creatures heard before the darkness. For millions of years, the Phorusrhacids held the line, a living testament to the endurance of the dinosaur lineage in a world that had moved on without them. For millions of years, the ocean was a moat that kept the avian kings of South America safe from the rest of the world. But deep beneath the waves, the earth was moving. Around 3 million years ago, volcanic activity and shifting tectonic plates finally closed the gap. The Isthmus of Panama rose from the sea, creating a slender land bridge that linked North and South America for the first time in an eternity. This was the beginning of the Great American Biotic Interchange, one of the most chaotic and transformative events in the history of life on Earth. It was a prehistoric clash of the titans. From the north came the heavy hitters of the mammalian world, saber-toothed cats like Smilodon, giant short-faced bears, and bone-crushing dogs. From the south, the terror birds began their march northward. For a brief, incredible window in time, these two vastly different evolutionary lineages, the feathered heirs of the dinosaurs and the rising mammalian carnivores, hunted the same plains. One specific hero of this era emerged, Titanis walleri. This was a massive terror bird, standing nearly 8 feet tall and weighing over 300 pounds, that successfully crossed into what is now Florida and Texas. For a long time, paleontologists believed the mammals simply outcompeted the birds. But the fossils of Titanis tell a different story. These birds didn't just survive the arrival of the mammals, they thrived alongside them for hundreds of thousands of years. They were specialized high-speed sprinters in a world of ambush-heavy cats. However, the rules of the game were changing. The isthmus didn't just bring predators, it brought new competitors for food and space. The mammals brought a different social structure. Many hunted in packs, a stark contrast to the likely solitary nature of the giant Phorusrhacids. The landscape itself was shifting as well, as the closing of the Panamanian Seaway altered ocean currents and global climates. The open, predictable savannas, where the terror bird was the undisputed master of the sprint, were beginning to fragment. This was a time of immense ecological pressure. Every kill was a battle, not just with the prey, but with the scavengers and rival predators that now prowled the corridor between the continents. The terror birds were no longer the only nightmares in the tall grass. They had reached the peak of their range, touching the soil of North America. But the very bridge that allowed them to expand was the same road that brought the agents of their eventual decline. The birds had held their ground against the mammals for longer than anyone expected, but the world was becoming a much more crowded and much more dangerous place. The end of the terror birds was not a sudden catastrophe like the asteroid that had cleared the way for them millions of years prior. Instead, their reign faded in a slow, agonizing transition, a death by 1,000 cuts delivered by a changing planet. As the Pliocene gave way to the Pleistocene, the world was cooling. The lush, stable environments of South America began to fracture, and the vast open grasslands that served as the terror birds' hunting highways were transformed by shifting weather patterns and the onset of the ice ages. In this new, colder world, the specialized biological machinery of the Phorusrhacid began to falter. Their hunting style, the high-speed pursuit and the precision pickaxe strike, depended on specific types of prey and wide-open spaces. But the Great American Biotic Interchange had brought more than just predators. It brought a wave of clever, adaptable mammalian herbivores. These new animals were often faster, more agile, or more heavily armored than the native South American fauna. Simultaneously, the arrival of placental carnivores like the saber-toothed smilodon and pack-hunting canids created a level of competition the solitary birds had never faced. While a terror bird was a formidable one-on-one fighter, mammals brought a new weapon to the field: pack cooperation. Pack hunters could protect their young and defend their kills more effectively than a lone avian giant. Gradually, the terror birds were squeezed out of their niches. Their reproductive rates, likely slow, as is common with large apex predators, couldn't keep pace with the rapidly breeding mammals. One by one, the great lineages flickered out. Titanis vanished from the north, and the last of the giant Phorusrhacids in the south followed shortly after, roughly 1.8 million years ago. But the story of the dinosaur who rose again doesn't end in total silence. If you travel to the grasslands of modern-day South America, you can still see a ghost of this ancient empire. The Siriema, a long-legged terrestrial bird with a sharp beak and a predatory glare, is the terror bird's closest living relative. While it stands only a few feet tall and hunts lizards instead of horses, it retains the same distinctive kill strike and the same defiant, upright posture of its 10-foot-tall ancestors. The terror birds proved that for tens of millions of years, the avian line was capable of reclaiming the throne of the dinosaurs. They were a bridge between the deep past and the modern world, a reminder that evolution is never truly finished with a successful design. Their fossils remain as a testament to an era when the sky didn't just hold the birds, the earth belonged to them.